Raoul in Saginaw, Michigan writes to me, Paul, I enjoy your videos very much. Thank you, sir. You make them informative and interesting. Well, I does my best. Yesterday I came across a review of shorting plugs in which the reviewer warned about using them. And so I was wondering, should shorting plugs be used on all or just certain unused RCA inputs? Can shorting plugs damage a receiver, preamp, or an amplifier? And then how? Are shorting plugs as needed on newer equipment? Thanks, Paul. Well, let's first start, actually, now that you're standing here, look at these bad boys. Woohoo! Our chief engineer's son, Brian, put these together. And these suckers are for the 20-inch subwoofers we're going to put into Octave Studios in the mix room. I am excited. Man, look at the size of this thing.
Wow.
Wow. This is so cool. I come back here to the shop, haven't been here for a few days. Stuff just appears. I love it. All right, shorting plugs. I've never been a big fan of shorting plugs, but let me explain what they are. So, on an RCA connector, you've got the little penis, the hot lead, and then you've got the shroud, which is the ground. And we plug it in. That's a standard connection. So it's two wires, ground and hot, and we plug it in. Okay. If you don't have something plugged in, you have an RCA connector, the female part of it, that is open to noise or whatever. So a lot of people feel better by putting a shorting plug. It's a cap. It's the end of an RCA. If you were to take an RCA cable and snip it and peel back the two wires and then twist them together, that's a shorting plug. Right? So and these are fancier because they're molded and they look nice. But essentially that's what you're doing. You're just taking the hot and the ground and tying it together. Now the reason that we might do that, like for example in the lab, I've got shorting plugs, for the RCA shorting plugs, and we use those all the time, and we do that for noise measurements. So especially on a phono preamplifier, if we want to measure, let's say, the baseline noise coming from the input, from the circuitry, the phono preamp circuitry, we'll put shorting plugs in, because when shorting plugs are in, it gets closer to what it looks like a cartridge would have. So a cartridge generally has very low impedance, and it's kind of like putting a shorting plug in. So if you ever take a phono stage and you have nothing plugged into the RCA inputs of a phono stage, and you turn the volume up, you're going to get a lot of hiss. Plug the cartridge in, and that's because you're essentially putting a shorting plug in. You can do the same by plugging a shorting plug in. Most inputs, we're going to ignore phono stage for a moment, like auxiliary inputs, I was going to say tape, but no one has tape anymore. The inputs that are what we call aux inputs, those typically could care less whether you have a shorting plug or not. Now, I know a lot of people are going to argue with me about this, but generally, if you look inside the way these things are built, they're not even connected. Like any one of our products, there's a switch on the front, or a button, or a remote, where you select a particular input. Well, guess what? When you select that input, a set of relays, or electronic or mechanical, will connect that input to the circuitry. When it's not connected, it's just a pair of jacks sitting there on a PC board. Now, could signals, noise get in onto the PC board? Yeah. I've done this experiment a number of times. I've plugged in shorting plugs. I can't hear any difference. I can't measure any difference, not on those aux inputs. But for a lot of people, it makes them feel better. Lastly, the question also was, can you hurt anything? No, you can't hurt an input by putting a shorting plug in. What you can do, you can hurt an output. So just don't screw it up. If you take and short the output of your preamp, Many preamps won't care. Like all of our preamps have a 100 ohm resistor in series with the output to make sure that that doesn't happen. In case it does happen, or, that it won't damage anything. And most things aren't going to be damaged by it. But there is the smallest of potential to damage an output if you screw up and you can't tell the difference between input and output. And we've all made that mistake before. All right.
Now I can't wait for the subwoofer. Ooh.
Talk to you later. Bye.